Hello and welcome to this Work That Reconnects Network event. My name is Jo Delamore and I am happy to represent the Work That Reconnects Network. Thank you so much for joining us for this Webinars and Conversation Cafe series, where we're offering a wide range of rich educational and supportive opportunities for our global community of Work That Reconnects facilitators, members, and friends of the network. We seek to strengthen the Work That Reconnects community around the world while continually reaching beyond our current edges to weave deeper connections with others who are contributing to the great turning in diverse and complementary ways. Today, we are really excited to welcome Vincent Brown and Kevin Lay to share their experience and knowledge of the experience of men in the Work That Reconnects. So we're really happy to hear what they have to say here, and we want to welcome Vincent and Kevin warmly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jo.
Thank you, Jo. Seth, welcome everybody. I'm really excited and honored to have this opportunity with Kevin and Jo to present this workshop cafe today. And I am living on the California coast, about 2 hours north of San Francisco, in the traditional occupied lands of the Pomo, the Northern Pomo people. And that's just a quick introduction for me. Kevin?
Hi, my name is Kevin Lay. Born back in Ohio and found my way here to Portland. And Portland is the occupied territory of the Clatsop people, which are part of the Chinooks, grand people that had lived here for thousands maybe. Thank you for allowing me to share my experiences with the Work That Reconnects.
Thanks, Kevin. So we're going to get going. I want to just say a little bit about, this is to follow up with the article in the Deep Times Journal that was kind of a quick overview of my dissertation research at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And my goal was to figure out something that I could do to benefit the world. And it looked to me like with the historic damage done by mainly white Western men, I took that as my topic because I had such a wonderful experience working with men in the Work That Reconnects. And so we're going to get into a real quick overview of that. I want to start reading a short poem by Antonio Machado. It's called The Wind, One Brilliant Day. And this is a conversation between Antonio and the wind. And this, I hope, sets the stage for, I believe, the work that we men can choose to do. So the wind, one brilliant day. The wind, one brilliant day, called to my soul with the odor of jasmine. In return for the odor of my jasmine, I'd like all the odor of your roses. I have no roses. All the flowers in my garden are dead. Well then, I'll take the withered petals and the yellow leaves and the waters of the fountain. The wind left and I wept, and I said to myself, what have you done to the garden that was entrusted to you? And so I believe that we live on a garden. I believe that our planet Earth, Gaia, is a giving, loving mother who provides for all our needs. And I think that we're spoiling it and wasting it. So I hope that that poem has some meaning as we go into this day. So Jo, you want to bring up the first slide? So in my work, we did 3 men only work that reconnects 2007, 2008, and 2012 with Joanna as our leader, Joanna Macy. If you're just visiting for the first time, don't know Joanna. But anyway, so my research questions, there was a very kind of a self-organizing group of men. We were by and large white, Western heritage, cisgender educated, middle-aged and older males and that's also was a self-selecting group for my research. And so my primary question was, what are the benefits for men who engage in this work? And then only about 10% of the participants at the most co-ed workshops are male. And so my secondary question was, where are the men? I've never seen more than 10% men in a mixed group, a co-ed group of work that reconnects activities. And so the implicit question was, how do we get more men involved in the work, which really we hope that this gathering can help with that. Next slide, please, Joe. So, and I'm just going to read this, everybody can read it, but just read it together. The need that I saw was the damage, the historical damage caused by Eurocentric male dominance, the social structures of white supremacist capitalist patriarchy, and then alexithymia, which is a psychological disorder of sorts that is literally the inability to identify and put words to emotions, which is by and large a male phenomenon. And that emotional numbing prohibits personal and social change. And so the work that reconnects activities help us reactivate our emotional feedback channels so we can actually identify and tell other people about what we're feeling. And as I said, only 10 to 15% male attendance at these work that reconnects retreats and workshops. And I'm really happy to see so many men here today. Next slide, please, Joe. So I based my work off a study out of Boston College called the Social Masculine Norms Inventory. And these are male behaviors that are so ubiquitous in our culture that they're considered to be socially created, and winning, emotional control, risk-taking, violence, dominance, playboy, self-reliance, primacy of work, power over women, pursuit of status, and disdain for homosexuality. And so these, if a man doesn't exhibit a majority of these behavioral traits, then they're not considered to be a man in this culture. And there's all kinds of feedback from that, from peers in society and whatnot. Next slide, Joe, please. And so the benefits of doing the work that came out of my research and from the interviews with the men was they gained a vocabulary to express their feelings and emotions. For some, they developed their first close male relationships. It gave them a community of men to grieve in and with, and the ability for men to grieve together was something that was talked about by almost every single man in my research. They got more self-awareness and more sense of self, their true self, more communication and listening skills, and less need to be in control, and learned to trust the process. And I believe that was the last slide, correct, Joe? Yeah. And so what we're going to do is, that's just a quick overview. And so part of what we're trying to do here is to poll the group and see if there's interest among other men that are involved here to get together and have some kind of a regular, semi-regular working group. And we're going to, the most important thing is going into the dyads, and it's the conversations we have in the dyads, and then we're going to come out and have a discussion. We're going to go through the spiral. Kevin, is there anything you want to add before we jump into the first? Let's see.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit of a celebratory note. I mean, how many are here and how in it with us today? I don't know how to find that. Oh
We
wait,
have,
there are 31. Okay.
yes,
All right. Okay. It's so great to see everybody here. I am looking forward to us getting as deeply as we can in 2 hours.
Yeah, thanks. And just scrolling through, I can see a couple familiar faces and some familiar names. So thank you all so much for joining. And I want to say that in my research and in my work, it was largely the Western white cisgender male that showed up. But I think the conversation needs to broaden from that. And that's primarily the group that I see that needs the work, maybe more than any group, because that's the dominant group that's kind of holding patriarchy and patriarchal structures in place. But I personally want everybody to feel welcome. So gay and transgender and non-binary, for me, and I have my own growth to go through, and I'm not exactly sure always how to approach this, because I have my own conditioning and my own indoctrination, that my own hill to climb, and I'm willing to do that, and I'm going to make mistakes. But I would really personally like to open it up and have everybody that identifies with the masculine gender to feel welcome to show up and have their voices heard. And so I'm not sure exactly what to add more to that, other than I think that we can get right into the first dyad, and to get the conversation going. And I kind of break the feeling a little bit nervous here, so that'll help me regroup a little bit. And so with gratitude, it's really important that we start in gratitude. And it's just not to feel good. It's just, if we're going to deal with the hard conversation, if we're going to really go into the difficult shadow work, that, acknowledging the damage, owning the damage, and saying, okay, this happened. How can I as an individual, and how can we as a group start rectifying the damage done? We're going to have to know why we're doing that work, because that's painful. So this is the importance of gratitude for me, is to, we only protect what we love. So to really embed ourselves in gratitude, or you said, we leave out women. I am suggesting that I am a proponent of working in homogenous groups. So when we go into mixed gender groups, we're more knowledgeable within ourselves. And so we can interact, we can listen better. If you look at those masculine norms, we'll be less apt to take control, less apt to be dominant. So I think it's important for men to work as a group of men. I think it's important for women to work as groups of women. And I'm not saying we should exclude anybody. I'm saying that we should do our own work. So when we are working together, we could be better at it. And that might not, anybody is free to disagree with me. That's just my personal opinion and my approach. So our first dyad is going to be in gratitude. And the idea is, and hopefully you've had a man in your life that has benefited you and given you a gift of some sort. So our first dyad is going to be to identify what man or men played an important role in your life and the benefit you received from them. And we're going to have, I think, about 7 minutes for this, and then we'll come out and we'll have a conversation about how it went in the dyad. And then when we're in the dyad, I want to say that we're not going to be able to hear, hopefully we'll hear from as many people as possible, but please feel free to put your comments in the chat so we can harvest everybody's thoughts about this. So Joe, whenever you're ready.
great. I just want to say a couple of words about the technical experience of moving in and out of breakout rooms. So you're going to go into the breakout room and you'll have just a minute to settle in and figure out who's going to go first. And then you'll see a prompt come on your screen to let you know it's time for the first person to start sharing. The second person, please listen actively and no crosstalk, but just really receive. And then you'll switch. You'll see a prompt after 2 minutes for the second person to start sharing. Please turn on your videos when you go into your breakout room so you can see each other. And when you come back out, we're going to have a group discussion. So if you can keep your video on at that time too, that's nice, so that we can just be feeling like we're in the room together. All right, anything else to say, Vincent or Kevin, before we go in?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Look forward to the discussion.
All right, enjoy.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, well, welcome back, everybody. And I want to start, Vic, we hear that you didn't have a chance to share. Apologies for that. Would you care to say a few words before we get into the discussion on a man or men that was important to you in your life and why?
Well, actually, it was Kara who didn't get a chance to share.
Oh,
It went by so fast, we weren't sure, I didn't get a chance to
Right.
hear from her.
so
my
would-
sharing is basically that I never really felt like I had a mentor. My father was completely unemotionally unavailable, so I learned never to go to him from a
Right.
very young age. And I've never really had a living human being mentor. They were more like people I read about, in a search for kind of an identity to fit into this culture, which of course is pretty of a futile search for me as an identity to make myself feel like I fit in or something. Right.
Great.
So that still lurks. I'm still searching for that, and that's probably why I'm drawn to this group of men who are really questioning the whole masculine paradigm and our whole and how to be engaged in the world in a helpful way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for being
Mhm.
here. And so did you say that the person that didn't share was Sarah?
Tara.
Was
Tara?
Tara?
It was
Oh.
it's me.
Tara.
Oh, well, would you like to say a few words, but before we go,
Yeah.
Kira?
When you first posed this question, I couldn't think of any man in my life who had been positive. My father was tyrannical. My whole family was just, the men were dominant. But then as we went along, as Vic and I went along, someone popped into my head. It was a professor that I had when I was at university, a professor of psychology. And I didn't figure it out for years and years, but I knew that Robert saw something in me that was worth bringing forward. And so he and his wife became my friends. And I can say that he had a really positive effect on me.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. So if anybody would like to speak, to go down to the bottom of your page to the reactions. And if you click on that, you'll see a raise hand tab. You click on the raise hand, we'll be able to see you. And then after, if you click on it again, that will lower your hand. So would anybody like to share their experience in the dyad? Nick, thank you. And you're muted. You need to unmute, Nick.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
now we can. Thank you.
I grew up with a very loving father and 3 sisters. I'm calling in from Boston. I had a very good chat with Albert, who's going to speak, I hope, because I think we both had good dads. And I was very supportive of men. I was very close to men. I went to all male, all white, of course, all male colleges. I'm nearly 80, so I'm one of them traditional establishment people. And I basically had a positive feeling about a lot of men, starting with my dad. And I have actually worked a lot of my life. I'm just retiring, but I've worked on improving the roles of men in developing countries and in the US in support of women's reproductive health and rights and justice. I was the director of the foundation that took Roe v. Wade to the Supreme Court, and I worked in Southern Africa against apartheid. I was beaten up by white Boers who were trying to stop my anti-apartheid work. So I've had a generally positive view since my childhood of potential positive roles of men in the lives of women and in the family. But I've also seen a lot of violence that men can wrought. So if this whole thing fascinates me, and I hope to continue. Thank you, Vince.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you here. Wow.
Anybody else? We have about 10 minutes to spend in having a discussion here. If we have anybody that would like to speak. Dan Walters. Hey, Dan.
Hi.
Good to
I
see
just
you.
wanted to mention the experience that I had, wondering if others here have had it. I grew up and saw what males seem to supposed to be, just looking around, growing up in the Southeast US. And it wasn't for me. I didn't identify with it at all. And my dad didn't particularly, but I came out with this feeling of not self-identifying as male. It wasn't that I self-identified in another fashion, hetero, a guy, but just really couldn't connect to, didn't have a desire really to connect to that culture that you had the slide about the normative stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. And that's a you know, identity, you know, it's like, you know, I identify male, but not that male, you know. Okay, Barry, and then Paul.
This is Barry. I live in Colorado Springs. Had a good chat with Marion. What came to me, I've had mentors over the years, but the most helpful one is when I stopped practicing law after 22 years. I became a middle school teacher. And there was an assistant principal in that middle school, a man, and not very many other men in the school. But for me, I felt so insecure and inadequate as a teacher after feeling very confident as a lawyer. He was very helpful in awakening me to the need for empathy for every kid in my classroom, no matter how they misbehaved or were disrespectful, not take that personally. But he was a mentor through all the time that I was teaching. So I'm very grateful for him. He had strong Native American heritage, and he brought some of that to his work and our relationship. So I still value that relationship today, even though I've been retired for over 10 years.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. That would be an interesting discussion. You know, what kind of male behavior does it take to be an attorney and then to be an educator? That in itself would be a wonderful workshop. Thanks for sharing. Paul.
Yeah, thanks. I spent a little bit of time in the main room just sharing about the juxtaposition between my uncle, gay, living in New York City. I'm from Australia originally, from suburbs of Australia, of Western Australia, of Perth, and my gay uncle in New York City, who I came to visit when I was 20, compared with his brother, my father, who was very angry and violent and scary to be around as a young fella. And actually the influences of both of them on my life have been really profound. I do work on ecological masculinities, which is how Kevin and Vincent and I have found each other. And I'll put a couple of links in the chat if you can't see them already about my work that has been influenced very much by these two guys. My father being the gift. I think part of what helped me was actually seeing the gift in having a father like that, rather than being stuck in the victim mentality about it, of like, well, my father really gave me the gift of being able to show me what it was about what he was modeling that I didn't want to develop, and really gave me the energy to go look for something else. And my uncle, his brother, younger, being, very much not cis in many ways, really showing me some other ways of being. And then I wanted to add that to that, and I also put in the chat that I've also got two young fellas in San Francisco who I think many on this call would be really interested to know about, Dora and Ophir Harborough, who are in San Francisco doing work with the Jewish community on men's business, but also from a non-binary perspective. And I get mentoring and influence from the younger ones as well. And I wanted to say that because we typically look ahead of ourselves to the older. And being older doesn't necessarily mean you are eldering. You can actually be eldered by people that are younger, certainly in my case. And so I thought I'd mention that as well.
Thank you, Paul. And I had that experience at the university, and maybe we'll hear a little bit more about that. So thank you. Albert.
We are. My experience of stability came in my childhood, and I think that's unfortunate that doesn't happen more. And so I weathered a tremendous amount of issues and still look for we men who maybe be gathered in this room right here, and we don't have our hands up often in the larger culture. It's very challenging. I was sexually molested in the Air Force in the Vietnam era, and although that made me very wary about a lot of things in life, it did not close me to the opportunities to have meaningful relationships with men if we were so inclined. But inclined is the issue. That does not often, it's hard to see, let's say, and because there are so many ways to guard it. And then the whole idea about a gay or straight or something like that really further muddies the opportunity, because it has nothing to do with gender preference. It has to do with open hearts that men have with each other. So I guess that's good for now. And thank you for this opportunity. It's right, just the very experiences you talk about, we are few and far between in most social movements. It's a sad reality, and we keep working at it.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much, Albert. Thanks for sharing. And Sebastian, so good to see you. Come on.
Hey, thanks, Vincent.
You bet.
I resonated with what one person said at the beginning, is that it took me a little bit to think about like who in my life was, what man in my life I felt gratitude for. And so I had to think more recently, and actually who I mentioned was you, Vincent. Oh. And just like Vincent and I went to grad school together, so that's where I met him. And yeah, it just gave me a hope for the world. And I just really appreciate the work that Vincent's doing. And then I started thinking of some others, since I started thinking more recently in my life. And you know, like my best friend Joshua, and we've been best friends since we were 12. And but I also wanted to name, like, I could really resonate with the, like, identifying as male, but not that kind of male. And so it's just like, because I'm transgender. Sorry, my phone was about to die, but I'm transgender, and you know, always felt like a boy, but I'm kind of a feminine, like really tender-hearted boy, you know, or man now. And so I'm just like, do I really identify as a man? Like, not in the way a lot of our society views men. And so that's something I've been struggling with. But it's just really great to be on this call and like be with men who care. So thank you.
Deep breath. Thank you, Sebastian. And talk about learning from a younger, wiser person. I've learned so much from my relationship with Sebastian and others at grad school. So big heart. Okay, we got a real quick one, John, and then we'll go on with the program.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay.
I'm John. Thanks everybody for sharing everything so far. I suppose my experience has been, I grew up with a very strong mother, very feminist mother, and a very caring father. So I grew up eventually going into all boys secondary school from a mixed primary school. And I suppose my experience in the all male high school or secondary school had quite a strong and confusing, I suppose, effect on me and how I perceived the world. Yeah, I suppose that's something that I'm hoping to work on and think about. And so thank you for everyone sharing your views.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thanks.
John. Appreciate that. And thank everybody. Thank you all for sharing. And so obviously coming from the heart, greatly appreciated. So now we're going to go into the next station on the spiral, which is honoring our pain for the world. And this is really the where the tough discussion happens and where a lot of growth can happen. And it's also where there's a lot of resistance to go into. In my research, it was widely acknowledged that this was one of the most important things that we can do, and yet there was a pretty broad spectrum resistance to do it, or how quick to do it, or how to do it. And so this is really where the rubber hits the road, so to say. So we're going to do the dyad, and as we recognize and acknowledge the historic damage of patriarchal social structures and how deeply these structures are ingrained in ourselves as men and in society, this is a real challenging part of ourselves to address. This kind of what we call shadow work, if you will. And so the dyad question is going to be, given the socially created masculine norms, what are some concerns with having more men involved in the work that reconnects? And I've looking specifically at this because of the normal conditioning to be in control and have all the answers and stuff like that. So I want to acknowledge that it can be hard working with some of us guys. So given these norms, please speak about the concerns you have for having more men involved in the work. And however that may arise in the conversations. And please keep an eye out for the prompts that will show up at the top of the page. Hopefully it works. So Joe, up to you.
It's all ready. The question is in the chat. So if you, when you go into your breakout room, you can reopen your chat to see it. And please, yes, keep an eye out for the prompts. Okay, here we go.
Robbie.
This meeting is being recorded.
Those look like sequoias.
All right, you're all set, Vincent.
Okay, well, let's hear from somebody. How was the dyad for you? Just raise the reaction, raise hand, and it'll put you on the front of the list so we can see you. Vic, you're up. You'll unmute.
There we go. Sorry.
No worries.
I met with Lenny. We had a good laugh. We both loved to laugh. And we were saying, both of us had the sense that, well, it's kind of self-selecting. I'm not really too worried about, I would like to see a lot of men, and it seems like a pretty self-selecting group that would want to join this group, for one thing. So it wouldn't worry me very much. And if a man was doing behaviors that were dominating or controlling or whatever, kind of cultural ones, that would be what we work with. My experience is I don't feel comfortable when you said that, right? It would be part of our own process, right? To help each other see how we experience each other.
Right.
Right. So
great. That's it?
Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
All right, great. Well, you know, it is a very self-selecting group, and it's also that in my experience, and it was part of I got the joy of being in a dyad to make the thing even, is that you get into it and we carry a lot of trauma with us, and so it can be surprising what comes up, and the need for that container to hold us is very important. But that is the work. That's why we would gather to do that work. So that's excellent. Thank you. Albert, you're up.
Okay, there we are. So I've got an interesting experiment that I couldn't imagine how I could reduplicate. I'm a military sexual trauma victim, and so I counsel at the VA, and one of the facilitators asked if we would like to have a men and women's sexual trauma group, and we have such a thing, and it's quite amazing. It would take a lot of time to talk about it, but this idea about wanting to be dominant, that just doesn't happen with a mixed group, and yet it's a self-selecting group also. It's only certain men that can speak that are in that group. So I think working with women, as hard as it is for me, the discipline that I require to have, and the request for them to tell me to be quiet, the openness, is a part of the work to be done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for myself, after doing this work with other men and getting a little bit more of a grip on myself and my own conditioning and whatnot, going back into a group with women, they've literally been so appreciative because of being able to listen and that. So it's really important work. And that's really the goal, would be to be, you know, feeling good enough in my own skin that when I go into a mixed group, I'm appreciative and can listen and do that work, because that's step 2 for me. Lenny, you have your hand up? Thanks, Albert.
Yes. Yeah. So just briefly, the biggest thing, or the question wasn't, you know, the concerns about, as Vic was saying, the concerns about, you know, having more men involved. It's how do you get more men involved? Okay, because everything, all the different groups, all the different things that I've been involved in the past, or the work that I do, there's a lot more women involved in this kind of thing than men. So yeah, That's my big question.
Yeah, yeah, that was the implicit question in my research, and actually the reason for why we're here today. And we'll have more information on that. But thank you very much for that. Mr. Walters.
Lenny, I had to become a person I didn't think I could be to try to do that, to bring more men in, because I had the issue of not self-identifying with what male was. And I had to think about, well, how do we get them here? Well, I had seen in an organization where the leader was a hell of a good inviter. And I had learned from him how to be an inviter, even though I didn't think that way. And it finally occurred to me, who's going to ask him? It had to be me. I didn't know somebody else that was infused with the desire. I mean, I knew some other men who were involved in the process, but we were a small group and we really needed to get other people to be asking as well. So I had to start. And it's been an interesting journey. And one of the things you'll find out really quick are the same excuses men use over and over to not participate. And so you take those things away one at a time. You just help them overcome each of those obstacles. But it's a great question, and it's lots of fun to try. And I have not been wonderfully successful. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I'm just going to give you a shout out. And in the 3 men's work that reconnects retreats we had, Dan was one of the principal people and mainly the one to get other men involved. So you may not have been as good as you wanted to be, but you were great for us. So we really appreciate you and thank you for that. Tiara, and then this will be the last one.
I forwarded the email that I received from this group to about 10 of my male friends and associates. No one is here.
Yeah. You know, this is the work. This is the work. For me anyway, is there is a reluctance for men to admit what's going on and work together. And so, yes, Sebastian, we have a few more minutes. So go ahead. You can be our next up. And thank you.
Hey, yeah. I'm coming back to what I wanted to say. Let's see. So I was thinking about so if it's only a men's group that we're talking about, and then it's like my concern is without some additional diversity, is there enough awareness to know to be I guess to be aware of the unconscious things that might be still in the patriarchy, or in the the more toxic masculine traits happening that aren't as conscious. I'm sorry, I'm not writing that very well, but
I think I'm hearing you. We'll see. Is that it, or is there more?
Yeah, so well, I've been thinking about doing men's groups and saying men are especially welcome, but it's open to all genders, for additional people who are wanting to hold space for men and add diversity to the groups or something like that. And I'll this can be in addition to what you're doing, Vincent. I totally support how your approach also, if you want just men in your groups. But
right, thank you.
Yeah.
And that, I think there's a lot to be learned, because I don't know, there's so much ingrained in our conditioning, and I think that's the importance for brave people that are trans or non-binary. I know we've learned a lot from the gay men who have participated, at least I have. So That's why I want to be inclusive and invite that, because things will pop up and all of a sudden there's the conditioning and now we have a chance to deal with it. But it takes some bravery on the parts of non-binary or, trans, or, somehow we have to come to face those. We are out of time. Bill, can you be really quick?
Yeah, I just think that, in this culture and men, we get an extra dose of some really hard, oppressive things. And so we're in terms of, we're sort of starting from a bit of a way back. And I appreciate that you brought us all here together where it feels a little safer and maybe it's a little easier to risk showing some of that stuff. And so I think that, that it's just recognizing that the way all those things sit on us men, we have a little extra work to do. So it's going to take us a little longer, and we have to be a little more gentle with each other.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate that, and thanks everybody for sharing. John, I think Kevin is up next, and I don't want to dig into to his time. So thank you very much, John. And if you feel free to write your comment in the chat so we can have your voice in writing. And so I'm going to step aside, and Kevin, it's up to you.
Great. You can hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. So I wanted to back up a little bit and just say that I'm doing what we're calling the third quadrant, right? And I'm not sure that everybody knows the work well enough to know that it's Joanna Macy's work that Reconnects is divided into. It's this beautiful structure that that's really used for a ton of things. But it's 4 quadrants, and love of gratitude for love brings you into dealing with losing what you love, into this really emotional point where our compassion starts coming up, and that vulnerability that we can find really can open us up into these grief for the things that we love, and in this 2-hour session, it's it may only be a shadow of that, but it's really important to understand this section that I'm going to speak about, which is called Seeing with New Eyes. Sometimes it's called Seeing with Ancient Eyes. And it's what follows this really emotional, deep grief time, when we have a longer time to actually experience it with one another. In this case, we're grieving about the role of men, and it's so deep, it's hard to break into and become really, really emotive, It requires a lot of safety. And I think a men's group, smaller groups can create that container that's safe, to where we can actually, it's okay for us, to feel grief. It'll contain it. It'll contain the rage that we may have. It's powerful. And this third section is sometimes, since it follows this really hot section, of really a lot of, weeping, maybe, if you can get there. This is sometimes people will say, well, this is the cooler part where we get to have ideas that can come up about how we can, go forwards, how we can, what to do. And it has a lot to do sometimes with this cooler kind of compassion, where it's about these really neat ideas. Well, the thing is like, the way I see Seeing with New Eyes and Seeing with Ancient Eyes, it can be really wonderful and welcoming to have these new ideas, but somebody has got to have these ideas. Somebody, and my way I say it, somebody's got to grow the new eyes, and create some new idea. Joanna Macy has done wonderful work that way for me personally. And you may have ideas about, okay, how can we correct this? Some ideas that we get from somebody around. But there's another part of it is if you go deep enough into the emotive, vulnerable places that last quadrant could bring you into, that you could grow eyes on your own, which is not very comfortable. But if you can really go that deep, it becomes more of a not so much a mental thing, but some kind of aha moment, and that I like to encourage for this thing. So, like an example of that, I don't know if you guys are familiar with John Seed, an idea of growing new eyes that he had had. He was chaining himself as an activist to a big tree in Australia, and it was in that moment where he was facing the bulldozers coming for him, um, that he realized that he was the forest acting for itself. He was part of the forest, and his actual being was now a part of the forest protecting itself. Now that's a great example of somebody growing new eyes at that moment, in that instant. And then we all get to he gets to we all get to share in this idea, which is another a wonderful way to get these growing new eyes. We can take advantages of the forest and John Seed. So the idea that I want to focus here is in the context of men and men's work. I wanted to share a dyad that I'd like to go into, and it's like, how might the future look if more men had a healthy sense of their masculinity and we could work in tandem with women as equals in every respect? And I like the question because it really narrows it down to working together. It doesn't necessarily have to get any, living together. There's a whole lot of questions here. We'll just narrow it down to work together. How might things change if we were in this capable of arriving at a point where men and women and people in between, whatever they're bringing, how we can work as equals. And so I think I'm ready just to go into the dyads, and we'll have a discussion afterwards to see what
Great.
comes up.
Perfect. The question is in the chat. I'm going to open up the rooms. Enjoy.
All right.
This meeting is being recorded.
Oh, goodness.
Yes, it is. I want to welcome you all back. This is and to start things off for a discussion, there's been some really, really wonderful things in the chat room. One of them, just before, had to do with what Dave and Greg were talking about with men in dominant positions. If the system's working for them, of course, they're not going to be interested in dismantling their privilege. And then Greg mentioned that men who are not in dominant positions, may not want to be involved because they are purposely withdrawn. That's interesting. And then relating, I wanted to also mention John N. had mentioned that he says, I feel like I relate a lot to what everyone has said about numbness and male socialization, but how basically it's like, but my issue is that even finding similar-minded people is difficult. So how do you all manage yourselves? And it's like, oh yeah, how do we? I wish I had an answer. It's like everyone's navigating their own way through turbulent waters, and I don't know if people that in your eyes that may seem to be, making progress, I don't know if they would be able to say how it's done. It's so many million different moves that we make subconsciously, and I don't know how to evaluate that. So we've got some great things here happening. Marian is at the top of the list. Let's hear from Marian.
So I was speaking to Dan, and there are two things that occurred to me. I think the future would look more democratic and more representative. And as a result of that, having a more diverse range of perspectives participating in planning would lead to better planning decisions. But then the other thing that occurred to me is that if we have men who want to participate and probably feel that they're taking a risk, an emotional risk, then I think the other people need to also change their expectations of what men might contribute. So we'd have to be really open-minded to actually listen and encourage for men to do the work in the way they want to. We can, with our expectations, actually put up barriers, and then that stops men from participating. They might have a go, but they might say, no, thanks, I've had enough of that. Don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. Can you, so it's to allow the men's groups to form as they need to, um, so that we can still work together as well, right?
Yes, and if there are women participating in those groups as well, I mean, then the women also have to change their expectations and their behavior in the group, so that the men can fully participate. So the women need to be open-minded and leave their own prejudices at the door. We know we all have prejudice. It's about being aware and then not acting on it, so that the other person who's taken the courage to participate fully actually gets a chance to do that and doesn't get discouraged. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I like this idea. If that could be broadened out for everybody, we're always, having our expectations, at least to be conscious of them. I sometimes get caught in such things. It's like I didn't know I was so biased. I had no clue that I, was acting in a way that was really, really blind. It's very shocking, actually, sometimes. It would be cool. Yeah, I welcome that. Thank you. Thank you. Nick, yes.
I want to weigh in on this because I think we're all carrying around stereotypes. Even this group Zooming today can't help but carry with us the baggage of gender stereotypes that we've all been surrounded by and grown up with, and we're still surrounded by. And I think it's really important we continue to remind ourselves that we have far more in common with the other genders than we have been led to believe. And this is a very big problem in my experience. And I go back to a decade I spent at Brandeis in the Women's Studies Research program, because so many women who did good social science research tried to get rid of this illusion that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. It's a crock. And the authors who make millions of dollars expounding on that theory, they love to say how different men and women are. And we have to remind ourselves too that we have far more in common with each other than we realize. We have more characteristics. We cannot generalize about men being taller and stronger and all that stuff. It's evil that a lot of people have distorted the facts and exaggerated gender differences for years, and it sells a lot of books. It sells TED Talks. It has articles in the paper all the time and magazines, and it's simply not true. So I guess I'm trying to put a plug in for more optimism among all of us who think that these gender gaps are just irreparable and enormous. That's nonsense. We have so much we can share, and I work with men to get men to be more involved in treating their wives with respect and raising their children and doing housework. And it really has made a difference. It's very slow, I grant you. It's not going to happen overnight. I've talked to lots of people. Gloria Steinem is among them. She says we're making progress, but it's still generations ahead of us just like generations behind us, are going to be struggling with this battle against gender exaggeration, gender stereotypes.
Wow.
I could
Yeah.
elaborate, but you get my point.
Yes, it's so true. Yeah, the one thing about this work is it does find commonality through our gratitude. And that was one way, but I so appreciate what you're saying. I just so right on. I have to, we have to like keep moving on. We got 3 minutes before we go to the next, and we have a lot of hands raised. So, um, there's Terry. We have just a few minutes. If you can keep it break. I'm afraid we're not going to be able to get to everybody in this section, but the next section maybe we'll be able to open up more. Hi, Terry.
Hi, first of all, I'll thank Marion for speaking much of what I wanted to say. I'll put it in other words. I think that what'll have to happen, well, let me start with, I inherited, and I think most of us inherited a traumatized masculinity. And so being trauma informed and aware, I think the work that Reconnects will have to change, that we will have to become trauma informed and aware so that we can understand male trauma. And if we can do that, then men will feel like they belong and not so much included. I'm going to include you into this thing that started with a woman and has been primarily female or woman dominated for so many years, that if we're going to make men feel like they belong and safe, we're going to have to become informed about what will help them. And I'll also add people of color, any people of color. How do we include, or how do we create spaces in which those people feel they belong? And I'll stop there.
Yeah, I love that. The belonging is such a powerful word. See, I've got, whoops. One more. Okay, Greg.
I just wonder if instead of working with women side by side, I'm wondering if I'd favor women leading. Like, let's just turn it around and women can be leading, and I'm happy to follow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I think I love that. I mean, talk about being fluid, I guess is the word is sticking in my mind, about not necessarily having any leader necessarily, but have people lead, everyone popping up, if you will, and leading for a moment, and then everyone naturally rising. Yes, yeah, I hear what you're saying. Yeah, certainly, women are finally getting a chance, I think, in politics too, and to rise naturally. Thank you. I wish we could speak more on this subject, but we're going to move to the next quadrant and final quadrants. This one's called Going Forth, according to the spiral of the work, and I'll give it back to you, Vincent. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. And Sebastian, if you want to make your comment in the chat to make sure that we hear what you had to say. And this is a good the last comment on women leading. There's I'm sure that if a large enough section of women were polled, we would have on one end of the spectrum, you guys have led long enough, shut up, sit down, and let the women take over. All the way to the other end of the spectrum is, where we work collaboratively and we welcome you. So, I mean, I'm sure there's a wide range, and they all have some validity, and there's a lot of history. And so I really want to acknowledge the women leaders, I think, that we're seeing, especially in politics now. And we have our first Black Supreme Court woman who was treated so horribly during the confirmation hearing, so we can see the resistance of that, but her poise and her she was so rock solid that was a real great example of women in leadership, and especially a woman of color. under those circumstances. So I really support that. And it's, for me, it's like, who's most qualified to lead now? And so I just want to give my support to women in leadership. Absolutely. So now we're at that point of the spiral going forth. It's like, what do? We've had this experience. We've shared some of our hearts. We've got a lot of really great comments, have a lot of things in chat that I'm going to be going over and using for food for thought, as well as this recording. There's going to be a couple follow-up sessions. There's going to be an opportunity for men and masculine identified to show, it'll be in an email, but we're looking at April 28th and May 14th, two different times, so we can maybe get East and West Coast and others showing up to talk about how we might take this forward. And so the last dyad is going to be, what is the vision of getting more men? Is there a vision for getting more men? What did I write down? Where do we go from here? Invite men to connect, which I did, put name in the email chat if interested. And then some ideas from people in the chat. How do different people see the availability for more men getting involved? How would you like to see us reach out to you? How would you like to reach out to us? What do you see as the vision on how we can go the next step with this? And so, are you ready for the dyad, Joe?
Yes, I'm all set. And I put the question in the chat.
Great. And so same rules apply. We'll see you on the other side and have a little discussion before we close.
Great.
This meeting is being recorded.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sorry.
Okay, well, welcome back. We're looks like we're in good time now. And so it was interesting I got to participate in a dyad, and the comment was made that how much the question about how have men suffered from patriarchy, and that gets to the question that was asked earlier, or a comment in the chat about how men that the system is working for them, and air quotes, working for them. And so they're not going to really want to give up that power position control in order to join a group in a discussion such as this, because as far as they see it, they see the system working for them. But then the question is, how is that system affecting them negatively in subtle ways that they're not really aware of? And I do want to also back up a little bit and give a shout out to our friend Terry, who spoke a little bit earlier, Terry Sims Booker. And because Terry has also been involved with the not only the work that Reconnects, but in working very, very central to the 2012 men's gathering. And so I just want to give a shout out to Terry and say thanks for being here and participating in all that you do. And his comments about men's trauma. And it's like, for me, if we live in this culture, we're traumatized in some way, everybody. And there's a double wounding for men, because it's totally up for debate, but in my mind, this is how I'm describing it. There's the wounding that's done to us by the patriarchal structure, that we may not really understand or identify all that well. And then there's also the damage that we do to ourselves because we have to deny our inner nature, our inner compassion, our inner nurturing. Some might say because we all have the divine feminine, we all have the divine masculine. There's no separation, Mars and Venus, that whole thing, I totally get. So these, compassion is a human emotion or a capability. Nurturing is a human capability. Love is a human capability. But we've been indoctrinated and conditioned into thinking that, women are compassionate and nurturing and men are strong and dominant. And it says, no, it's just, that's not exactly the way it works. That's how we've been taught. And so there's a lot that here again, men, getting back to the confirmation hearings with Ketanji Jackson Brown, is that, what's a woman? She was asked, literally, define what a woman is. Well, here I use the word man a lot, or men a lot, as that's actually something that you can put quotes around. And so, please take that as a big generality, men. So what I want to have us talk about here is how we can move forward with all the things that we've heard and get more men involved. And so Tiara, are you still up? There you are. Lead us off.
Yes. First of all, Vince, I think you're exactly right about trauma being an epidemic in our social structure. We are not a psychologically healthy culture. And Em and I were in the dyad last time, and we both were in alignment about being just kind of sick and tired of joining Zoom chats all the time. And then, next week I'll move on to the next thing. No, I'm done with that. I want to dig deeply. So, and being a woman, I'm not going to be invited into your men's group. So I want to know, are there any other people out there who are interested in being in groups? And I don't care who belongs, men, women, doesn't matter to me, who are wanting to dig deeper into what it means to be healthy in our world.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Terry in the chat says, I'm interested in an even more basic question. Why do we want more men involved in the work that reconnects? What are we assuming? So thank you, Terry. That's just more food for thought. Albert, you're next.
Yeah, that is, why do we want to be here? Because it takes all of us. That would be a good question, because it's not a man or woman issue. That's why we want to be here, at least this week. And so what I've found a very useful tool to move forward is to be careful and use the term they. And have single conversations, mostly with men, about that, and not be too obtrusive about it, but just talk about they, because we like to change diapers, we like to be soft, and so they is a really nice adjective, I think, evolving as a tool, and I'm using it as a tool all the time. So, and again, it isn't in WTR, I live in a rural area, but it's just moving the process forward so we work together.
Great, great. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Sebastian, you're next.
Getting back into what I want to say. I guess, I don't know what has been coming up for me, and something that I've noticed in my gender journey and identifying in different ways is that I've just like the need for really safe spaces for men without this like almost like hatred or blame so that they can process. You know, it's like I just like as I started living my authentic truth of identifying more masculine, I was just noticing it, just like, oh man, there's so much heat and anger towards men, and I just feel so much compassion for that. And you know, and having been treated differently by women, like especially in relationships, being read as a man compared to as a woman previously in my life, and just like, wow, there's all these assumptions that you're making, that you seeing me through this lens that I don't understand. Like I'm still the same person, you know, like I have compassion for this, and you're assuming that I don't get it because you're seeing me through this lens that I'm a man. So I just wanted to bring that to the conversation.
Thank you very much for that, Sebastian. And I know that I've experienced that in certain circles. So that's real. Thank you. Greg, you're up.
The conversation I had with Marion was, I suggested that it's time for women to lead. I said this earlier, and people of color. And we were like, well, where do we find examples of that? And one thing is we could look in other places in the world where some cultures still do this, and try to figure this out, figure out how to have a society where men are not dominant and leading all the time. We've tried 4,000 years of it this way. Let's try another way.
Yeah, thanks. You know, and actually, arguably, 8 to 10,000 years, hyper individualized, hyper masculine, hyper dominant, and it is time. And I think a lot of the pain and suffering and the polarity we're seeing in the world is the dying of that structure. It's no longer working. The issue is, how do we nurture what's coming? How do we join that? You know, and getting indigenous cultures. I could list off women that I just have so much respect for as leaders and role models. You know, so how can we, you know, culture aware and appropriate, get them and their voices involved. Very, very important. And thank you for bringing that up. John, you're up.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, just I had a really good conversation with Bill. We were focused on, you know, thinking about broadly what a vision would imply. And for myself, it was really about kind of thinking more broadly about, well, is it about liberation and about kind of like thinking about how we, you know, like for example, you know, the Shambhala warrior prophecy is not, it's not gender based, you know, it's kind of, it applies to both. And I kind of think, well, yeah, you know, that, and that kind of, that language might speak to men, and just thinking like, yeah, about liberation, that there's a common liberation here. And if there was kind of like, you know, a wave 2 feminism route in the work to Reconnects up until today, or until recently, you know, we can think about, well, yeah, what's happening today maybe is to kind of think about, yeah, like common liberation and sort of unpacking it for all people, all identities, and yeah, just
yeah,
included.
Yeah, thank you for that. And there was a comment. Well, there was a couple that now that I'm looking at the chat, you know, the Pachamama Alliance and the Game Changer Initiative. They're a group I've been involved in and doing great work. And the interest of you know, having a mixed gender group where we can take this conversation with you know, not necessarily just a men's thing, you know, which I think again we need to there's a benefit to working in in like-minded, like gendered, like culture groups, homogenous, if you will. But then always going back into the diverse, broad spectrum groups with a mix of cultures and ethnic backgrounds and identities and all that. So I really am feeling like this is kind of stirring up some creativity and some energy in the field. So, the Shambhala warrior, in South America, there's the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, speaking of the Pachamama Alliance and their work in South America. I went down and I lived with the Achuar, a community out in the rainforest near the border. Actually, their territory crosses border in Peru now since the 1942 war. But they're a dream-based culture, and the woman plays a whole different role. I mean, it's still kind of patriarchal, but if the guy crosses the line, she can actually draw blood, can't kill him. I mean, so the women are very, very strong down there and have a whole different way of being in the world. And the eagle and the condor prophecy is also non-gendered. And then the North American prophecy that's up from the area that I'm living in, the prophecy of the Rainbow Bridge and the Rainbow Warrior, is also a non-gendered prophecy of people learning to work together. But in that prophecy, you have the bridge builders, who I consider myself a bridge builder. But in the prophecy, the bridge builders aren't necessarily the ones to walk across it. So there's an implication that we're building the bridge for our children and our grandchildren to walk across, which being a grandfather means a lot to me. So we still have time if anybody else has anything to do, bring back into the circle before we close. We're going to be letting you out right at noon as promised. So we have about 9 minutes. Anybody have anything burning that they'd like to bring forward? Paul, and then Sebastian.
Yeah, just to say it's really delightful to be part of this conversation, and I'm so glad that there's going to be ongoing unraveling of it. I do want to share, not just from my theoretical thinking about this, because this is work that myself and my colleagues in Sweden, based mostly in Sweden, have been unpacking both theoretically and practically for some years now. That there is a risk or a danger of getting so focused on the man question that we end up unconsciously putting masculinities in its normal hierarchical structuring in the center of the room and putting the light back on it again, which when we do that, in and of itself can actually be off-putting for many people who are traditionally marginalized. So that was the main thing, is I think it's really tricky to actually put the man question or the masculinity question in the middle of the room. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, I'm just saying heads up. And then the other thing I wanted to say was that when we talk about masculinities in the ways that they show up in certain people's bodies, I'm really glad to hear that we're talking about masculinities that are different from people in men's bodies, that there's masculinities in all of us. I think that's a really important distinction. And that just by the sheer nature of being in a male identified body means that regardless of where you are, how marginalized or not marginalized you are, that you automatically get certain privileges, in the same way that a global northerner who's even really struggling to make ends meet has certain privileges over people in the global south. And I think we should not forget that, because then that's reminding us of the decolonial aspects, so that we've got an intersectional lens on this stuff that we're unpacking here.
Yeah,
I'll stop there.
Thank you, Paul. And I say that it's taken a year and a half to get here today. much because of what you just said. It's like, how do we do this? I don't know. Like I want to be completely transparent. I'm as socially indoctrinated as anybody. Luckily, I've been involved in the work that reconnects, not only with some amazing women, just amazing people, and then with the men over the years. So I've been able to peel a couple layers off, but I don't know how to do this. I really don't. I'm shooting in the dark here. I'm taking a big risk. I'm still a little bit nervous because how do we do this work? How do we? So I really appreciate you adding those tidbits, because we need to keep that in our awareness as we move forward. That this is dicey territory. We need to go there, but I'm not exactly sure which path or paths to take. So really appreciate your addition. Sebastian.
Hey, thanks. I know I've talked a lot, but I guess I have a lot to say on these topics. So thank you.
Oh, you froze up.
I wanted to, okay, am I back now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, I wanted to circle back to the question about in the chat, I suggested framing the question to how men can work in tandem with all genders, and then in that reframing, that there's this it creates this space for authenticity, where there's or what I imagine in the future is that there can be more authenticity, and just like, instead of like, I need to live up to these roles because I'm seen as this, and I'm seeing you as that, and so then I need to react this way, all of these things. And that's one of the things that I learned in my journey, is just like, I feel like I've found this space where I'm much more available to like presencing, and emergence. And that's where, like, I feel like transformation happens, where insights happen, where the magic in life happens, where the aliveness is. And with like dropping all these preconceived notions of who we need to be in the moment, we just are the beingness of the moment, and like allowing that to arise.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate you bringing your voice and speaking. It means a lot to me to see you here personally, so thank you. We're going to be winding down. We have a few minutes. Kevin, do you have anything that you would like to add?
I am just so impressed with the ideas here, and the idea of getting out of our heads and away from concepts a little bit more into the body and being present, and not so much speaking from, clearly here. This is, it's really an honor to be with everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Greg, I see you got a thumbs up. That's not a hands up. Okay, thumbs up. Thank you so much. And Joe, anything from the network side of things?
Yes, a big, huge thank you to all of you for participating in this, for being willing to come and step forward and speak and share and listen and learn about this important topic. And I'm going to post it in the chat again because it got lost. So I just want to let you know, if you want to be involved with the work that Reconnects Network, we invite you to become a community member of the network. There's a link there in the chat. We'll also have some information about that in the follow-up email. So I know that some of you are deeply steeped in the work that Reconnects, and some of you might be new. So welcome to the community. Thank you for participating in this. And really, for all of you who identify as male here in this space, I just want to extend an extra gratitude for the experience of being in a work that Reconnects space that is majority male identifying, and to see that you're there, that you care, and that you are wanting to be involved. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And I also want to extend my gratitude for everybody being here and being so willing to share and to make your voices heard. I'm really inspired. I know that I'm going to spend the rest of my day thinking how to do this again. I have put my name and my email in the chat, and I believe that the chat is able. Yeah, I see that it's enabled. So if you don't know how to save the chat, on my screen, it's in the bottom right-hand corner of where you write your message to post in the chat. There is a couple little icons, and then next to the smiley face is 3 little dots. If you click on that, those dots, it'll say save chat. And so you can save the chat. It'll save it to a text document on your computer, and so you can save all these, not only the resources but the conversation as well. I want you to know that I'm going to be going through this several times to harvest all the wonderful things that has been brought up and discussed today. So just so much love and gratitude for all of you and for your participation. Thank you, Joe, for doing our support, our technical support and backup. Kevin, thank you so much for being here. I love you, brother. I don't want to do it without you. And to the other guys, Terry, good to see you again. Molly, love you. Dan, love you. We'll do this again, I promise. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.